Good morning, everyone. So today, one of the important concepts we are going to discuss that is called generic. And here, this particular generic concept is introduced in 1.5 onwards here. So basically, what we are exactly like with the help of this particular generic, what we are going to write here, like we have the two important ways we are going to use. In the two important ways, this particular generics are changed here. The first one, so it is added new syntax here. It is added new syntax here, and the second one, it has changed the many of the existing core core classes here. What all the core classes were used earlier? All the core classes are changed here, like interfaces, classes, method, all it is changed here. Okay, so this is very important. We need to understand. So using this particular generic here, basically, we are going to define the new syntax here, right? And what exactly this particular syntax will do. Basically, the generics will call it as a generics. We are going to call it as it's a parameterized type here. So we are going to add one extra parameter here. The parameter is going to like the parameter we can add at class level or the interface level as well as the method level. So this is important. We need to understand here how we are going to define this particular parameters here. Okay, how we are going to define this particular parameters here. So let's write a simple example so that we can easily understand how we are going to use this particular parameterized concept here. Basically, using this particular generics here, we are going to create a classes and interface and methods so that are going to provide the type safety. Getting the point? That are going to provide the type safety here. So this is one of the important concepts we are going to discuss here. So let's come up with the simple example how we can write generic concept. So to write this particular generic concept here, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to providing so one another package here. Getting the point? So generics I'm adding. So with help of this particular generics here, I'm going to create a first example, something like gen. Okay. So this is the generic I'm going to create. Now observe carefully. This is the first time we are creating a generic classes here, and this particular generic classes internally, what exactly it will do? Here I'm trying to define the one parameterized type here. Okay, I'm trying to define the parameterized type. Now observe carefully. Here I'm trying to define the type here. Getting the point? So this is very important. We need to understand. This particular section we'll call it as a generic concept, and here I'm trying to add one parameterized type here. So what exactly the parameters type is doing internally? Okay, this is important. We need to understand because we discuss about the classes information. So beside this particular class, I'm trying to define one type here. Okay, I'm trying to define this particular type. We need to understand this particular type, what exactly it is doing here. And here now you can see I'm using the same T and I'm trying to declare this particular object here. Whatever the T I'm defined here, whatever this particular T I'm defined, here I'm trying to use the same variable declarations here. Okay, and what we need to understand now, what we need to understand here. So I'm going to create a one constructor. So public the same generic constructor I'm trying to create here, and inside this particular generic here, the parameter also I'm trying to providing same T here. So here I'm trying to providing type here. Observe carefully, this is very important here. And here now what I will do, this dot obj, this dot obj is equals to obj. Okay, so this is the way of the constructor creations here. And after creating this particular constructor, now what I'm trying to write here, I'm defining one method. I'm defining one method. So it is returning the type called same t here, and get obj method, and it will return the obj. Now observe carefully. So this particular type, in how many locations we are using? This is the generic type we defined here. Getting the point? This is the generic type we define here, and TOBJ here we write the parameter instead of writing integer or getting the point, integer or string something different data type. Now what I'm doing here I'm trying to define as a type here. Here I'm trying to define as this particular type, and whenever we are calling this particular constructor, I'm trying to specifying the same type here, and finally I'm going to return the particular type of object here. Okay. Now, if you observe carefully, so this is totally, it is trying to depends on the type here. It is totally depending on this particular type. And finally, I'm defining one type here. What kind of type this is? So I'm going to print this particular messages here. Inside this particular print here, type of T is. Okay, so type of T is basically, and here what we need to understand here, obj dot get class dot get name. Getting the point? So using this, now what we are doing here, we are trying to find out the name of this particular type. Okay, so observe, this is one of the important example we are discussing. Just I'm declaring this particular type, and so here also I'm defining type. If I'm removing this particular type, in all the location we'll get an error. In all the locations we'll get an error here. So why we are getting an error? Whenever we are trying to create or specifying this particular generic object here we are not going to specify what type of object we are going to pass here. Getting the point? What type of object we are going to pass. So because of this, now what happens internally? Getting the point? Because of this, what happening internally here, the compiler cannot understand what is the T here. But now, once you specify the T at the class level, because this is the generic concept will try to specify at the class level. Based on that only, we are going to use in the different locations here. We are going to define the generic concept in the different locations here. Okay. So the same T, I'm trying to use multiple locations here. Getting the point? This is important here. Now, what I'm doing here I'm going to create a main method. Here only I'm trying to create a main method. So inside this particular main method, now what I'm doing is, now observe carefully. So what kind of the object we are passing? Now you can observe carefully here. So if you observe carefully, what kind of the object we are passing here? Here we specified the T. The T now, getting the point, whatever the T we are providing, the particular T, it is going to replace with this particular integer. The particular T, now it is going to replace with this particular T. This is important here. Now, this T, it is acting as a integer. This particular T, now it is acting as a integer here. Okay. Now you can see here also it will play as a integer role, and here also it is going to play as a integer, and the same way it will try to return the integer object. Getting the point? But instead of integer, now what I'm doing here, if I'm going to make as a string. Getting the point? If I'm going to make as a string, what happens again? So again, it will try to play another important role here. The T, it's going to replace it with this particular string here. The whatever the T we defined here, the particular T, it is going to replace it with this particular string here. So now, observe carefully with the help of this particular generic concept here. Now, what we are doing basically, we are trying to, getting the point, we are trying to replacing the appropriate data type here. Okay, without modifying the code, with the help of this particular generic concept here, I'm trying to replacing the code here. I'm trying to replacing the code. So this is very important example we need to understand here. This is very important example we need to understand here. Now I'm trying to use integer first. So here, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to providing 88 here. Okay. Here I'm trying to call the constructor. Okay. So this is the constructor we are passing here because constructor is expecting one parameter. So this is very important we need to understand. Now what happens internally if I'm removing this? So it's giving me an error here. Why it is giving me an error? Because here the constructor, whatever the gen constructor we define here, the gen constructor, it is expecting one parameter. So we should provide the one parameter information here. Okay. So this is very important information we need to understand here. Getting the point. So how we can write this particular information here. So here what I'm doing here, because of this particular parameter, even though the parameter we provided as a type, like a generic type here, but now what I'm doing here, based on our requirement, I'm trying to providing the values here. For example, if I'm going to provide something like a, this is giving me an error. Why it is giving me an error? Here the type what we provided here, the type we provided as a integer, but right now, the type we are passing here, like to constructor parameter, character. Getting the point. So this character and integer both are not same. Now you can see the error basically cannot infer the type arguments. Getting the point. This is important. We need to understand this particular example here. Whenever we are trying to defining this particular type here, we should follow the same type here. Getting the point. We need to follow the same type. So we cannot go for the another type. Okay. The simple example here we need to provide the integer related example. So this I'm giving 88 because of this particular 88. Now what happening internally? So the 88 is going to convert into integers. Okay, so observe carefully. Whenever we are creating the specific object here, we need to specify the type of this particular generic type here, and the generic type. Now, what happening internally? It is trying to use the different location wherever we are trying to use. So now, what I am doing here? If I'm trying to print this particular object here, the objective we created here. After creating this particular object, now what I will do? Now what I will do, here I'm going to call this particular get obj method. Get in the pen. Now I will call the get obj method. So for example, here what I will do, get, and this obj, it will try to return the int value. Now if I'm going to print this, now what happening internally, now you can see it is trying to return the integer class we discussed in the last example. So whenever I'm trying to call this particular get obj, internally what happening? So these are all the methods we have inside this particular integer class. We are able to access all the methods here. Okay. So finally, I'm trying to converting into this particular int value, and I will print this particular int value. So what is the value we are going to get here? The value will get as a 88 because while creating the object of this particular generic, we pass as a 88 here. Okay, the line number 16, we are trying to create an object and we pass the parameter as a 88 here. And after this, now what I will do, obj dot show type here. So this is the show type method will give you the important information about the what kind of the object we are passing, what kind of the object we are passing here. And now you can see whenever I'm trying to run here, the first the get obj method is calling the value we are printing as a 88. So as I explained here, this particular 88 is coming from the where here we provided the line number 16. While creating an object here, object of this particular generic class, we provided as a 88, and the same 88 we initialize into the obj. Getting the point? Here it will try to pass as a 88. The 88 we are trying to set into this particular obj, and whenever I'm calling this particular get obj, it is trying to return the object here. Okay, the object contain 88 value. Getting the point? This particular object will contain the 88, and based on this particular 88, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to find out the class information. I'm trying to find out the particular class information. So this is the type of T is java.lang.integer. So how it is identified? It is an integer because here we provided as a integer. This particular type, whatever this particular T, now I'm replacing with this integer here. Okay, this is one of the important example we are discussing here. So any questions here? Any questions here? Okay, now observe carefully what I will do. I'm going to modify the same object here. Okay, so this is the generic object for this integer I created. Now I'm going to create for the string related example. Okay, so generic string here. This is the parameter I'm passing here, something like a generic string. Now observe carefully. The first object we created with the integer. The second object we are trying to create with a string here. So the same object, getting the point, the same object we are trying to modify with the help of this particular generic in a different ways we are creating. Getting the point. With the help of this particular generic concept, we are trying to create here in a different ways here. So this is very important information we need to understand here. This is the one of the important information where we need to understand. First, observe carefully the same generic object, but here we are passing integer value, and here also we are creating same generic object, but now we are passing string values. So now observe carefully what happening internally. Same object we are trying to creating with the multiple data types here. So we are trying to pass a multiple data types here. So there is no restrictions here. So you can create multiple data types here. Like you can create a multiple object with different data types here. So this particular creation will applicable only this with the help of this particular generic concepts here. Getting the point. This is very important information we need to understand here. This is very important information we need to understand here. How this particular generic concept is working here. So whatever the data type we are going to provide here. So whatever we are going to pass this particular type is going to use any locations here. But you only the information here, only the type is very important here. Getting the point. This particular type, whenever we are trying to create an object here, we should provide the type. If I'm not providing the type again, so compiler will give an error because at the class level you define the type, but while creating an object also if you specify the type, but who is going to identify the which type of object it is? So for example, if I'm trying to replace with a T here, if I'm trying to replace with a T, now you can see this particular T here it is given here it is getting an error. The line number 15, we are getting an error here. but the same T I provided at class level. So the class level T, it is not giving me any error. Getting the point? This is important information we need to understand here. Okay. So this is the simple example for the integer. Now I'm trying to create for the string related. And here, now what I'm doing here, here I'm going to provide the object information, the object I created. And once the object is created, I will call this particular str dot show type here. The show type will give you the object information here. Now you can see 88. I'm trying to print for the integer class, like whatever the objective constructor parameter we passed here. While creating this particular object, the constructor I'm passing with one parameter, and the same parameter we passed it to the like a string related objective, but the method I did not call here. But what we need to understand here, show type. The show type, how it is printing, this is important here. The show type, how it is printing, this is very important information we need to understand here. So observe carefully. First one we passed as a integer, the second one we are passing as a string here. Now what you understand here, so using generics, using this particular generics here, we can come up with a multiple data types, like we can use a different data types here, right? So if I'm not using this generic type, if I'm not using this particular generic type, now what happens internally? Only one type of object we are going to create. What is the type of object here? So something like this particular generic type will create a object here, and internally, so we try to create an object here. And here, whatever the constructor we pass earlier, like if the constructor is expecting string related information, so we are going to pass the string information. And if it is expecting or character or the double or boolean related, we'll try to pass the same parameters here. So once we pass the parameters, we are not going to modify the parameters here. But now observe so here also I'm creating the constructor. Getting the point? Here also I'm trying to call the specific constructor. But observe carefully, this constructor is expecting different value, and this particular constructor is expecting different value. Okay. So based on our requirement, we can pass the constructor value. So here I'm passing the string value, and here earlier I passed the integer value. Now what you understand here? So using this particular generic concept here, based on our type, we can specify the parameters here. So there is no restrictions here. Any parameters you can pass here. Any parameters you can pass. So for example, so one more object I'm going to pass. One more object I'm going to pass. So this is nothing but, here I'm going to pass as a box here. Okay. So I'm going to use this particular inherited one, and something like here we need to pass the object. So what is an object we need to pass basically? Now what is the type I'm using here? The type I'm using as a box here. Getting the point? Whatever the type we are using, the type we need to pass here. So if I want to pass this particular type, first I need to create a box object. Here I'm going to create a box here. Okay. I'm not going to provide, okay, we'll provide the values. So the three parameters constructor I'm passing here, and here I'm going to provide the box reference. Here I'm going to provide the box reference. So now carefully observe here. These two are the primitive data type we are using. First one is the integer, second one is a string. And now you can see the third object, whatever the third object we created, this is the custom type we are passing, because box is a custom type object. Getting the point? Box is a custom type object we are passing here. Now observe carefully, and here the parameter. So basically, parameter is expecting the type. What is the type we have provided here? Box. And if I want to pass this particular type, we cannot pass the box here. So something like this. We cannot box here because this is the data type basically. Okay. So whenever we are creating the box class, we already discussed here. This is the one of the custom data type here. Now we cannot pass the custom data type. We need to pass the object information here. Okay. So here the object I created in the above line number 25. Now I'm passing this particular the parameters here. And finally, if I'm going to print here, show box dot box dot show type here. Whenever I'm trying to call this particular information, now you can see it is trying to print this information. So what is the type of this T? What is the type of this particular T here? Basically, the T we passed as a object called boxer. And earlier, the same T we passed as a second one is the integer. First one we passed as a first one we passed as an integer, the second one we passed as a string, and the third one we passed as a boxer. Third one we passed as a boxer. So this is very important example we are discussing here. This is one of the important example we are discussing here. Okay, so this is very important example here. So now what exactly we are doing basically, we come up with a one generic class, and at the class level we define the one type. At the class level, we define this particular type. So this particular type is trying to use the parameter, and this is the for the constructor also we are using the same type. And whenever I'm calling this particular get obj, I'm going to use this particular type here obj, and finally I'm printing this particular show type here. For example, here after this particular show type, if I'm going to use get obj, now you can see it is trying to return the box object. Getting the point? It is trying to return the box object. Now, what we need to understand here, with help of this particular box object, now what I will do, I'm going to call the value method. So value method is not there. Okay, I think the value method we removed here. Okay, so we can load the one by one object here. So what is the one by one object we can load here? Get width, get height, and get depth here. So these are all the values we can load here. Box 2 I'm passing. With help of this particular box 2, get width. So these values I'm going to print inside this is out here. Okay. Box 2 dot get height here, and finally box 2 dot get to depth here. Okay. This is I'm going to print here. This is I'm going to print. This is very important here. Now observe carefully. So where I'm getting an error. Okay, so all the errors are resolved here. Now observe carefully what I'm doing here. So with help of this particular generic, now I created one box object here, and I passed to the same parameter to the I whatever the generic object we are creating here. After creating this, now I'm calling one method called get obj. The get obj method internally it is trying to return the box object. With help of this particular box object, now I'm trying to load all the three parameters values. So something like width, height, and depth here. Okay. Observe carefully how it is going to return here. Now you can see these are all the parameter values. So I will make as a comma so that we can easily understand here the three parameters here. Now you can see 45.3 is the first parameter, 78.2 is the second parameter, 96.1 is the third parameter. Okay, this is we need to understand here. But here, the important information what we need to understand here, this particular type, whatever the type we provided here, this is going to play very important role here, because here this we provided as a integer, and the same one we provided as a string, and the same one we provided as a box. So based on our requirement, we are trying to providing the type here. So once we provide the type here, the type related informations only we are going to access here. But only the advantage what we are going to get here, we can provide the multiple types here. Getting the point? We can provide the multiple types. So with the help of this particular generic type only, we have this particular advantages here. So okay. So any questions here? Any questions regarding this particular example? Okay. So if we don't have anything, now what I will do, here I am going to provide the another important information here. And for example, the line here, the last line I am going to provide gen, and here I'm going to provide to the int here. Getting the point? So this is the different type I'm trying to use. Something like here, in I'm going to use it. Observe carefully the line number 30, whatever we created, it is giving me an error here. Why it is giving me an error? This is important, we need to understand here. Okay, this is basically it is trying to expecting the wrapper classes or the custom object. Now what we can understand here, we can pass the object types here. We can pass this particular type here as a object type. We cannot pass as a primitive type here. Getting the point? We cannot pass as a primitive type. This is very important example we need to understand here. But now what I'm doing here, line number 30, we are trying to pass as a primitive type here. Okay, we are trying to pass as a this particular primitive type. Now whenever we are trying to pass as a primitive type, what happens internally? It is giving me an error here. Okay, so this is one of the important information I want to share. Only the generic type will it the generic type, it will try to load only object type, not the primitive type here. Okay, int here basically it is a primitive type. Now you can see what happens here if I'm not using this particular generic here. So this is one of the important example I'm going to share with help of this particular generic, and without help of this particular generic here. Because if you see whatever we created, like this particular integer is coming from the object class, because integer internally it is extending from the object class, and string internally it is extending from the object class, and this particular box also internally it is trying to extending from the object class. Getting the point? This is very important information we need to understand here. Okay, now observe carefully. Now observe carefully what happens internally if I'm not using this particular generic concept here. If I'm not using this particular generic concept here, what happens internally? This is another important example I'm discussing. This example, we are going to compare with the generic example as well as non-generic example. So the differences we'll easily identify it, so that we can get to know what are the advantages of this particular generic concept here. Okay, so let me define this particular non-generic example. This is non-generic example I'm defining it, and this particular non-generic basically what it will do, it will try to it will try to extend from the object class. Okay, and here now what I'm doing is I'm trying to define object to obj, and same constructor. Okay, same constructor, it is expecting object as a parameter. Obj, oj, and here I will pass object here, and the same get object method, get obj, whatever we used earlier, the same I'm trying to use return here. Okay, and finally now you can see object get obj, and the same show type I'm trying to use. The same show type I'm trying to use it, and what I will do, I'm going to copy the same show type here. Whatever the message we define here, the same message I'm going to copy here. Okay, this is important. Observe carefully. Instead of t, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to use a object here. Getting the point? So compare these two objects here. Okay, so basically you can compare these two objects here, the right side object as well as left side object here. So instead of here what we define the t, now what I'm doing here I'm trying to define the object here. Okay, so instead of this particular constructor t, I'm trying to define as a object here, and here it is trying to return the t, and here I'm trying to return as a object here. Okay, so remaining are same. Why I'm making object here? Because any class you are going to create in Java, by default all the classes are going to extend it from the this particular object here. Getting the point? All the classes are extended from the this particular object here. This is very important example we are discussing here. Now we identify the wherever we are using the t. Now I'm going to use the same t, and the t is replaced with this particular object here. Now here only I'm going to create an object here. And here only I'm going to create an object here. Now we'll understand here how this particular object is going to work here. So how we can create this particular object here? To create this particular object here, I'm going to use one more class, non-generic demo, and this particular non-generic demo is expecting main method, and inside this particular main method, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to create an object here. Obj is equals to new, what we need to understand here, new non-generic object, and which is expecting parameter. The parameter I'm trying to pass as an integer. Okay, so observe carefully what I'm doing here. I'm trying to use this particular non-generic demo, and what I'm doing here, I'm trying to creating okay, the non-generic demo basically is expecting here one parameter. The parameter value I'm trying to give as a 88. After giving this, now what I will do, I'm going to print the show type. First I'm going to print the show type. So let's see what is the show type it is going to print. Now observe carefully, it is trying to print as a integer. Okay, it is trying to print as a integer. Whatever the 88 we given here, the 88, it is printing as a integer. Finally, obj dot get object. Okay, obj dot get object. Now here what I'm trying to do, because we identified it is a integer. Now what I will do, I am trying to use a integer value here. So earlier we defined the same line here. So we can we define the same line. We happily converted all the values here. Okay, happily we converted all the values. Now what happening internally? Now it is giving me an error here. Why it is giving me an error? So if we have compared the previous example, what we did here, here you can see now directly the line number 19, what we are doing here, obj dot get obj method I call here. I converted into this particular int value. I converted into value. Now, so now what happening internally? So this example, I am unable to convert into this particular example here. It is giving me an error. Why this example is giving me an error? Getting the point? This is important one we need to understand here. Why this particular example is giving me an error? Because what is the type we used here? What is the data type we used here? The data type we used here, object. Now, even though the 88 is expecting as an integer, but whenever we are trying to go returning here, what is the type it is returning? It is returning as an object, not the integer value. Internally, it is not converting into integer type. Internally, it is not converting into integer type here. So explicitly, we need to convert here. Explicitly, we need to convert here. So observe carefully how I am trying to converting here. Okay, so this is the way of conversion. First disadvantage we identified whenever we are trying to use the object class here. Getting the point? This is very important example we are discussing here. So earlier I will copy the same line, whatever the line we used here, whatever the line I'm using here. This is the line. Here I did not use any the type conversion. Here I did not use any the type conversion here. Now what you need to understand basically, whenever we are trying to converting the non-object here, we need to use the explicit type conversion. Then only the value will, whatever the value we are trying to converting, the value we can load here. So finally I can print this particular value here. So type of this particular t is a integer, and finally the value I'm trying to after conversion this value, now it is printing as a 88 here. Okay, now it is converting as a integer. The value we are printing as a 88 here. Getting the point? This is very important example we are discussing here. So one more example, if I'm going to convert here, one more example, what we need to understand here. Same here. String example I'm using. Here I'm going to make as a str. Okay, whenever I'm going to make as a str, the constructor internally it is converting into string. Constructor internally it is converting into string. Now, once it is converted into string, I can print this show type here. Now you can see the second type here it is printing as a string here. Getting the point? This is important we need to understand here. Whatever the second type we are having here, the second type we are getting as a string here. Now once we get this particular string, what we need to understand here? What we need to understand here, I'm trying to call the get obj method. Getting the point? I'm trying to call the obj method. str dot get obj. So here, with the help of this particular obj, if I'm going to print this, whatever this particular obj, if I'm going to print this obj, first we'll see what is the value we are going to get. What is this particular obj will print here? Now you can see it is printing as a string here. It is printing as a string. The get obj method, it is printing as a string. Now what we need to understand here? Getting the point? So this particular get obj, it is printing as a string. Finally, what we need to understand here? What we need to understand here? So what I will do, instead of using this println, I am trying to converting string type. So you can see, even though the type is string, even though the value is returning as a string here, now here I cannot use here. I'm trying to hold into string here. So this value, it is not holding here. Getting the point? This value, it is not holding here. Now, what we need to understand here? Again, we need to again we need to typecast into this particular string data type. Then only the value, it will convert it into this particular string here. So otherwise, we'll get an error here. Otherwise, we'll get an error. So this is one of the important drawback we are having whenever we are trying to work with this particular non-object. Okay, so now you can see. So this is the value I'm trying to use here. And finally, if I'm going to use value here, the value will print as this particular string. So instead of this particular string, now what I will do, non-generic string object. Okay, non-generic string object we are having. I'm printing this. Now you can see whatever we passed here, the non-generic string object here, and the same message we are getting here. When we are getting this, whenever we converting into this particular string value, and once we converted into this particular string value, we are going to use this particular information here. Okay, getting the point. So this is important information we need to understand here. So these are all the basic the drawbacks we are having whenever we are trying to use this particular non-generic object. And here, using this particular generic object here directly based on this particular type, now internally it is trying to convert into the appropriate type here. So you can see here we did here, and finally the line number 28 also, whenever I'm trying to call this particular get obj, here it is returning object to the appropriate type here. So here we are converting explicitly. This is the one example, and this is the second example to convert the value into this particular data type here. Convert the value into this particular data type here. So this is very important information we need to understand here. Okay, so any questions here? Any questions regarding this particular non-generic object here? Okay, so if we don't have anything, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to work with two types here, like two parameters. So first one, we provided here only, here we provided only one parameter. Okay, we provided only one parameter. Now I'm going to provide one more parameter. So whenever we are having these two parameters, how we can access this information here. Okay, this is important information we need to understand here. Let me write the simple example. So it is going to hold the two parameters here. The simple one, 2 gen. Okay, so this is the two generic example we are discussing here. And this particular two generic example, first one I'm passing as a T, second one I'm passing as a G. Okay, after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide obj1, obj2. So for example, what happens internally, here I want to provide some different parameters. So earlier example we discussed as a T, now I'm trying to discuss as a with the different information. So R is the first parameter, G is the second parameter. And I'm trying to define as a constructor O1 and O2. So obj1 is equals to O1 and obj2 is equals to O2. Okay, this is the constructor. Getting the This is the constructor I'm providing. Now, whenever providing the constructor here, now I will try to print the type here. The type is important here. Getting the point? Whatever the type we are going to provide, the type is very important example here. Now I'm going to copy the same type here. So T we don't have. First one is R, and here we need to use the obj1, and second one I'm making as a obj2, and this is we are going to use as a something like a G. Okay, these are all the two types. Whatever the two types we are going to provide, I'm going to use the, like I'm trying to print this particular two type informations here. And after this, now what I will do, I will try to use the return types here, because right now how many methods we are, like how many parameters we are having? Two parameters. So what I will do, I will copy the same object information. I will paste it here. Okay, so first one I'm going to call it as a get object to one, and here I'm trying to pass R, and here I'm trying to pass G, and this will return get object to 2. Okay, this is important example. Now observe carefully. We passed here two parameters, something like R comma G, and R is a obj1 and G is a obj2. So it is expecting two parameters. The two parameters I'm trying to pass to the constructor, and later whenever I'm trying to print this particular show type, it will print this information, and finally I'm trying to return the appropriate object here. Okay, I'm trying to print this particular information here. So this information, I'm going to create an object inside this non-generic demo. So this is the main class I'm going to use to print to use the two dimensions example. Okay, so the simple example I'm going to provide. R we need to provide. So what is the first parameter? So basically, you can take the name of the parameter type here. You can take as a T, R, A, B, C, anything you can take it. Now, for this purpose, I'm using R comma G. The first one I'm going to give as a 88. It's like a integer. And second one I'm going to give as a something like a string. So what we can provide as a string parameter. Okay, so this is important. We need to understand here. Sorry, I wrote it wrong. First one is integer, and G I'm going to provide as a string. And here, so INSTR new string parameter. Okay, so this is important here. instr dot show types here. First we'll print the show types here. Later we'll call the get object 1 and get object 2. Observe carefully, whatever the R we provided, it is converting the integer type, and the G we are using as a string here. Getting the point? These are all the important parameters we need to understand here. These are all the important parameters we need to understand. First one is R, the second one is G. For R purpose, we used as an integer. For this G, we come up with a string here. Okay, and finally, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to print this particular values here. So what are the values we can print here? Directly, I'm going to print instr dot get object 1. Okay, and it will print the integer value, and this second one instr dot get object 2. Getting the point? This will print the object 2. Now you can see 88 is the object 1 and string parameter is a object 2. String parameter is a object 2 here. So this is very important example we need to understand on the two parameters. Okay, any questions here? Any questions regarding this particular second example?
No, sir.
Okay, so these are all the simple example on the generic example we discuss here. So we'll continue on the same generic concept tomorrow also. We'll try to continue. So tomorrow, like if we don't have anything, we are going to stop the session up to here and we'll continue. If anyone having any questions, so you can ask me. I will try to clarify your doubts. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you.